For joining Hit Chat Chit Chat. I am here with a special guest, someone that I have followed along on Twitter for a long time. I've been very interested in your X Factor for a long time. I've seen it kind of going through development stages. I've followed you on YouTube for a while. And I apologize if I mispronounce your last name. Please let me know. We have Cherryhomes.
Just like it sounds. Yep. It's perfect.
Beautiful. Hello and welcome to Hit Chat Chit Chat. My name's Connor Reynolds. On today's podcast, we are actually going to be going over. This is just going to talk about hitting, how much can go forward. I absolutely love the swing being compared to a cattle, scapular muscle. And what I'm going to look to try and do throughout the entire swing is build that tension. If you are a coach that is unwilling to ask why and the how of how to do something, and you are doing a disservice to your players, my goal is to try and make every single kid a Ken Griffey. Strider is here. The reason I like the cricket bat is it's flat. Thank you for the sub, my guy. I really appreciate it. What else do we got for the folks? There we go. We should be live. And if you wouldn't mind kind of going through a little intro bio about who you are, kind of what you do, and where you're located.
Yeah, I'm in Carlsbad, California. I was in Seattle. I'm from Santa Monica, California. I was in Seattle as a hitting trainer from 1998 until 2018. So I spent 20 years, did the bulk of my training there. Let's see, I started out as an associate scout with the Tampa Bay Rays in 2003. I got that job through a player who I had trained with the Rays from 98 through to the end of his career. And primarily I didn't want to scout, so I took an associate scout job. And the first thing I did, I think my second year with them, so it took me a year to do this, was I went out and found a player who really could not hit at all. His name is Matt Fields. He was a 285-pound junior in high school, batted .230 and had 0 home runs. He's 6'5", just a monster of a guy. Found him in a batting cage, and he actually came into my batting cages and was hitting off the machines. And he had the fastest, most powerful hands I'd ever seen in my life. And so I walked up to him and I said, "So, you don't hit many home runs, do you?" And he said, he's big, kind of shy guy. He said, "Nope." And I said, "Well, you will." And what I did was I offered him, I said, "Look, I'll work with you for free. All you have to do is dedicate yourself and show up." And I said, "I guarantee I'll get you drafted next year." And he said, "Oh, okay." And he showed up, and he ended up leading Seattle Metro. It was called Kinko. For those of you who are familiar with the Seattle baseball high school system, he was the leading batting average and home run hitter in the state of Washington in 2000 and I believe it was 4.
Oh, wow.
From there, he showed up to our pre-draft workouts we used to run, and I actually had him matched up hitting back-to-back with Matt Tuiasosopo, because he was like the biggest star of the Seattle area at that time. And Matt was raking. He was a good hitter. And Matt Tuiasosopo was raking, and he was a good hitter is what I meant to say. Then Big Matt comes up, and he's, with his jersey just stretched to the max. He was huge, and he just started dropping home runs that the other guys that were following him, their jaws just dropped. And first, you're at the showcase and you're feeling really good about yourself. And then in comes this giant, like pretty soft, fat kid, I guess I would say. And they're not thinking much of this guy. He doesn't look like a ball player. And then he just starts dropping incredible home runs.
Oh, wow.
So end of the day comes along, and, everyone, our national cross checker, who was R.J. Harrison, he, and all the other scouts that are there, my area supervisor, who just recently passed, Paul Kirsch, they all said, "Well, yeah, he's got an 80 tool for power, no doubt about it, but we'll draft him, but I'm not going to sign that body. I'm not putting my name on that body." I said, "Don't worry about it." What I had done was, aside from train him, I also did a lot of research on his eating habits. I did a lot of research on his weight fluctuations. I had long conversations with his mom about this, and I said, "Don't worry about it." I set him up with a nutritionist. I set him up with a trainer, and just worked him to death. And what happened was, this was back in 2004, as I said, and what they were doing back then was draft and follow. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yep.
Today you get drafted, they have to sign you within a small window, I think by August 8th or something like that. And back then you had a full calendar year just before the next draft to sign your player. So what they would do is they'd often have these guys go to JCs. You couldn't go to a D1 because then they're locked and they're stuck until their junior season, or when they're, I think, 20, something like that. I forget the rule on that. But in any case, he went to a JC, and he led the JUCO in home runs and just mashed. And what happened was, he incredibly transformed from this giant guy, and this had a lot to do with his subsequent personality changes, or his personality of how he viewed himself is how I should phrase that. He went from this big, massive, soft, doughy guy to an absolutely ripped 6'5". His playing weight was about 245, but at this time he got down to 235, of just like washboard with this weird looking marsupial pouch because of all the extra skin from being 285 pounds. But he was completely ripped, giant. And RJ even commented about Matt after several years in the organization, that he had only seen one guy with more power in his entire life, and that was Josh Hamilton.
Oh, wow.
Matt, yeah, and so we end up lengthening the story a bit. In junior college, I kept telling my area supervisor, said, "You've got to sign him now." I said, "Look, his coach is interfering, which, when you do this, you actually could lose your job as a coach forever." But he was telling Matt to don't sign, stay another year, you'll get drafted in a lower round and make more money. And I said, "Look, he's trying to convince him to not sign with us. You've got to sign him." And so he dragged his feet and dragged his feet and dragged his feet. End of the season comes along, and he goes and sees Matt play a game. He calls me from the field and goes, "Oh my God, I dropped the ball. I am so sorry. I had no idea it was possible for somebody to get that built that fast." And I said, "Look, I told you all along. I told you when this was happening that you've got to sign him. He's ready to play." And so he ended up playing about, I think, 13 years in professional ball. Won a AA home run derby, was an all-star. In one season in 2000, and I believe it was 14, he hit 32 home runs, and 10 of those were measured over 500 feet. There's not a guy in professional baseball right now, there's no big leaguers that are hitting the ball 500. This guy had unbelievable power.
Oh, wow.
And you can look all this up. I have all the videos because I get sent everything from him. All my players send me video when they're on the road or when they're off playing and I'm home. But yeah, so that's how things started with me in my professional career. I first found a guy who was a minor leaguer. He was in A ball at the time, and trained him through his big league career. From there, I said, okay, now I've trained a guy who is a professional player. Now I want to create one for you. And so what I had told Tampa at that time was, I go, "Look, this is what I want to do. I don't want to scout. I don't want to go out and waste my time looking at guys that you already know are good and just giving you a report that everybody else is reporting. I want to do it the old school way, which is find a guy and create him." Kind of like, there's a great book called Dollar Sign on the Muscle that talks about old scouting. It's a terrific book if you could find it. It was out of print and really expensive, and now it's back in print. I highly recommend it. It's a fun read, and it talks all about old scouting, of taking a train and going into the cornfields and finding a guy and turning him into a player and bringing him into the Cubs or the St. Louis Browns organizations and things like that. So that's essentially what I wanted to do. And they said, "That's great. That'd be fantastic." And so I got a few more players from them to train, but it didn't work out the way I thought it would or should have. They kind of just, maybe they thought it was an anomaly, or maybe they just didn't pay any mind to it. I don't know. So the next thing I did was I found a big league guy who was a perennial 300 hitter that got released because he went from being a perennial 300 hitter to a 208 hitter. And he was being paid $7 million a year to stay home. They essentially said, "We'd rather open a roster spot than have you on our roster, so we'll pay you to stay home." And like most professional baseball players that I know, he wasn't ending his career on his terms, therefore he wanted to play. So I ended up taking him, and I guaranteed that he would hit 285 the first year I worked with him, 300 the second year I worked with him. Based on the first year, as you know, as a trainer, I worked from the ground up. And so the first thing I had to do was work with his feet. And he had some very serious, he had the yips, he had a tap, he had a lot of problems with his lower body that was affecting his timing. So you have a mechanic that is a mechanic, but it's really timing related mechanics. So I smoothed out his lower body, and I said, next year I'll be able to work with his hands. Well, he ended up getting signed. He hit 281. He broke his hand sliding into second in Houston one game. And so, but he ended up hitting 281, which is pretty close to my prediction. Year two, I got to work with his hands and really start to work on his extension and things like that. And he hit 319. And so here I'm thinking, okay, not only did I take a guy who was released and prove that I can fix players that are broken, even players that were currently playing, and then I can predict what they would hit. And I thought, well, okay, who does that? And so I thought for sure my career was going to skyrocket. Well, we're talking about 2006, 2005 and 6 when I was working with this guy. And there wasn't a Twitter, there wasn't social media that really could sort of launch me like a teacher man sort of thing. So, I went totally unnoticed. I was without a doubt the busiest hitting instructor in the state of Washington, absolutely in Seattle. I had a full schedule with a waiting list of roughly 30 people all the time, year round. So I was in high demand. I trained all the best players in the state: Michael Conforto, Dylan Davis. All of these guys had an amazing 2011 class. And outside of my little pod in Seattle, I didn't exist. And so I was pretty bummed once I got onto Twitter. I'm not a terribly social person. I pretty much keep to myself. I don't keep a lot of friends. I don't really like talking all that much. So I realized, as far as trying to propel my business, my startup at the time, which is X Factor, which we'll talk about shortly, I got onto Twitter, and it was a very interesting world. It was a really interesting introduction. And so, I of course, like everyone, I happened upon Teacher Man at some point, and he and I had some pretty epic fights. The problem I have with Teacher Man or any hitting instructor is I will never deny that whatever they're teaching works, whether or not it is the best method, that's left for discussion. Or what I find problematic most often, because I won't tell these guys, your swing doesn't work. What I will tell them is the way you're portraying another swing, the narrative that you're creating for another swing, say a rotational swing, is absolutely incorrect. So you're making your style look good by creating a false narrative for another style. Talking about striding and how striding with a rotational type swing moves weight when you stride. And that's absolutely false. You move weight if you change the bend in knees. Okay, so our knees basically work like shock absorbers. And so if I had a more defined bend in my back leg and a less defined bend in my front leg, I have more weight back than forward, right? If I take a stride and I don't change those ratios at all, if the bends remain exactly the same, and you can use force plates to prove this to yourself, you won't be moving weight. You'll be spreading out the size of your base to accommodate a weight shift, but you're not moving weight at all. So you can actually stride pretty aggressively. And because of this fear of moving weight without understanding how weight moves, a lot of hitters land very, very softly. They're in a rather defensive and timid position because they're kind of tippy-toed landing because they're trying not to move their weight. They're landing on rice paper or ice or glass, whatever the cue is that coaches use. And I'm saying, no, you can actually, I actually prefer hitters that have a really aggressive stride as long as they're not moving any weight by changing bends. I love, because what that tells me is this hitter looks like someone who's about to make an open field tackle. They're aggressive. And so I really prefer that type of stride. That said, I have lots and lots and lots of hitters that were toe landers, and I couldn't change them. And that's okay, because what I would look at was, does this affect their ability to hit the ball? Is it aesthetically perfect? In my opinion, No. Does it affect their ability to hit? Absolutely not. It is not a prohibitor. Therefore, I just leave it alone. Nelson Cruz is a great example of that. I just put a video up of him the other day, which was sort of a sequential of him and how his stride mechanics work to get to launch. And Nelson Cruz lands on his toe, right? And I think we can all agree that Nelson Cruz is a pretty darn good hitter. So, you really want to work within the comfort zones of the hitter. And when you see something that may be anomalous or something that might not work the way you think it would be most efficient, you look at how it affects the hitter and if it affects the hitter. Does this prevent him from being able to hit the ball? If yes, then you need to start making some changes and some little nuancing there. If it doesn't, you just say, okay, that's his thing. And what happens is, if you have a little bit of a different move or nuance to your swing, and this happens all the time in professional baseball, and then you end up being regarded as one of the best or the best hitter in baseball, every hitting coach out there says, he does that different. See, that's why he's the better hitter. And I'll say, no, he does that differently, and he's a great hitter in spite of that, right? And so that's sort of my introduction to Twitter, was getting into fights over things like that and trying to open people's minds by, unfortunately getting into these gruesome arguments. I'm pretty articulate, and I don't know, I'd like to think I'm pretty smart, and so I do very well in my arguments. And when people are vicious towards me, I unfortunately became twice as vicious back. I ended up losing some followers. I ended up, interestingly enough, the feeds in which I was getting into these little brutal arguments where I was really like beating on someone tended to get the most views. I would look at my analytics and I'd get the most hits. And I started like assessing that and saying, is that who you want to be? But I thought, as far as trying to perpetuate my startup, the important thing is, the old adage in advertising is no press is bad press. So if I was getting the views, I was okay with it. But it really came down to a point where I said, that's not who I want to be. I really don't want to get in these arguments. And so I ended up blocking. Well, Teacher Man actually blocked me first because he just couldn't ever win an argument with me. And so he ended up blocking me. I blocked him and all of his acolytes. And so I've tried to keep it as conflict-free as possible, my experience on Twitter now, and try to be as positive as possible. And sometimes, unfortunately, as I'm sure you know, because text is flat and has no inflection, people misrepresent or misunderstand what you're saying because they're viewing, whatever lens they're viewing through at that moment is how they read it, And so they're hearing this really aggressive response, and I'm over here going, I'm not aggressive at all. My heart rate hasn't elevated in the slightest bit. I'm fine. So that's it on that. I'll let you ask another question if you want to.
No, I love it. And just to kind of bring around, I kind of was put into that situation, I guess, of trying to decide, do I want to keep interacting? I had my run-ins with like Jeff Fry and stuff like that, of just, my biggest thing is, and we talked about it in our DMs, is I just think the miss is people's perspective. People, I think, struggle being able to articulate and explain their perspective, and exactly what you said, people are reading the tweet, the text, whatever it is, through their lens, through what they are feeling, through what they're seeing, the situation that they are in, not how you are wanting to present it. And if you are a person that struggles being able to present that information in a way to allow for that conversation to continue with someone that is struggling a little bit to understand that, it just makes things difficult. And that was my biggest thing that I've been trying to do with some of these ex-pros and stuff. I actually got off the phone with somebody today that was like, hey, if I could give you any advice, stay away from the ex-pro guys. Some of them just, they want to have a fight, just have a fight. And it took me a while to kind of understand that. And like you said, those were your interactions that related the best analytics, the most clicks, the most drive and everything like that. And some people, like the ones on Twitter, Jeff Fry and stuff, that's how they make their money. He's trying to sell him going to places to speak. He's trying to sell, his business. And so it's just one of those where that's why he's doing it. He doesn't offer a solution. He just causes more issues.
Okay, so I have a comment on that one for you.
I love it.
I've known quite a few ex-big league guys, and guys that were, when I knew them, playing big league baseball, and then had retired. Of all those guys, I know two that retired on their own terms. One was John Olerud, the other was Jay Buhner. Both of those guys retired and could not care less to ever play baseball again. They're the only two. And so a lot of the ex-pros that we're talking about, they don't understand or don't know their place in the world anymore because they're not big league players. Their identity has now been shifted, and now they're citizens. And so there's a lot of defensiveness, and there's a lot of, but you don't understand because you didn't play. And that doesn't mean, I didn't have to play at the big league level to understand the big league level. Especially the more you work with other big league guys, then you kind of prove out, well, yeah, I have the same sort of experience. I don't know what it feels like to stand in the box against Pedro Martinez. No. But that doesn't mean that I can't analyze what's going on in that. And that doesn't mean that I can't come up with a solution to improve your performance against a guy like that. But yeah, the biggest issue is they are at a total loss of identity. And so they come on and they're, yeah, but I was a big league player. And sadly enough, oftentimes with big league guys, when they do end up retiring, many of their close connections, if they're still playing ball, they sever their relationships. They don't have time for outside people. And then, the players get their feelings hurt, and, there's all of that. But yeah.
It's an unfortunate kind of like little circle, you know what I mean? Where the guys that
it's
keep
like coming
feeding
back from
that,
war.
they just keep
Yeah, it's like
feeding
coming
it.
back from war. It's like I was a soldier, but now I'm a citizen. What am I supposed to do with myself? Who am I? And so that's a lot of it. Why I think a lot of the ex-big league guys are pretty condescending. And Jeff and I are friends. Jeff Ryan and I are friends. However, I don't follow him any longer because of a lot of the negativity. I don't agree with most of it, and he's known that, and I've made that clear even when we were interacting on Twitter. I said, there's a lot of things that I disagree with that Jeff says and does. I don't really like at all his random choosing of drills, particularly, because drills look weird, and you might do something specifically because somebody has this flaw, and you're trying things out, and a lot of the Shigan guys, and many of them, interestingly enough, aren't even baseball people. Some of the guys at the top of it, it's like Jeff Fry and Bob File are ex-big league guys, and then you've got the not Gaetti, who is like a softball player and a musician, and then you've got Tony Wench, who his best days, I think he was like 12 and 11 or something like that, and he always talks about those. Not baseball people, yet some of those guys, Tony particularly, has such an incredibly strong opinion of what's right and what's wrong. And I'm saying, based on what? Based on what experience are you saying this? And so, I guess it's similar to, are you familiar with the UT guy?
I am
Ron from
not.
UT? Okay, well, he is a close friend of Teacher Man and a defender of Teacher Man. And he's a guy who didn't play ball. It's very, very clear based on his body type and his movements and things like that. He's not an athlete. He created some kind of tee on a string that has a magnet that holds the ball, and that's his sort of credibility in baseball. But the second credibility is that he is closely attached to the HLP and Teacher Man kind of philosophy. And he's a guy who feels defended by being with a guy that's that mean as Teacher Man, the guy who you're aligning yourself with people who can defend you when if I can be the friend with the bully, fantastic. Then I'm suddenly a bully without being a bully because I'm protected by this. So I found that there was a lot of similarity with some of the Shigan guys, and I just it's one thing to talk about the charlatans out there. It's another thing to start picking at drills and things like that. some of the products out there or some of the drills, I'll even explain to them that, well, this drill actually has worth, and this is what they're trying to do with that drill. I know it looks funny, but more it was more and more it snowballed into an opportunity to ridicule and therefore elevate my stature, the Shigan stature, and I couldn't be a part of that. And so even though I really like Jeff very much, and I think he's a terrific guy and probably was an amazing teammate, such a cheerleader. Some of the guys that I've trained did play with Jeff and said the same thing that I said was, yes, he was a fantastic dugout guy. He was terrific.
That's beautiful, and I think it comes down to, we've talked about, is just that perspective. I think that they just get caught in that, whether it was how they did it or who they came up with did it, whatever it is. We talked about it in the gym. There's just some players that don't get that same feel or can't replicate the same reel as they were with the focuses and cues that they were having. And so, like you said, sometimes with a player's inefficiency of movement or their perspective on their timing or whatever it is, we have to do weird drills just so that way they can feel, understand, and see, oh, that's what it's supposed to be like. And
if I isolate my hands, then I can still hit the ball. I get it. And then you kind of integrate that into all the other movement patterns. Yeah.
One of my favorite drills to isolate the hands. I actually I couldn't find a harness that had a little loop kind of like right at the shoulder. I kept looking. I was looking at rock climbing wall harnesses. I was looking at everything. And the only thing that kept coming up that had a little loop right next to the chest was actually a sex harness that they would use. And so,
I'm not even going to ask.
I don't tell any of my players what it is. But
what drawer was that in?
And so pull that out, got a little deadlifting strap for that you wrap around the bar. That has a little loop right there. I got a band. I'm able to connect it. And it's just for my guys that struggle with kind of relaxing those hands and letting them work with the body a little bit. It's that feeling. It's a super weird, wild thing if you're just tuning in to kind of see what's going on. But if you're in an understanding of the process and the why and the how of what we're doing it, it makes sense. And it's just, I don't think that those two questions are asked too much from the Shigan movement. And that was mostly what I was kind of reaching out to them to try and say, hey, there's value in this. It may not work for you. It may not have worked for your son or whatever, but for this kid, it worked. And if it works for one kid, I think it's worth it. I really do. If it works for one kid.
Here's something for you on that. I was never a constraints guy. But when we talk about the difference between, how hitters learn and taking different approaches to teaching hitters and things like that, what I think a lot of us aren't realizing is that the instructor themselves are very different and very individual. And let's say for you, constraints were something that was a go-to that you said, okay, if I use this, then I can get this result. And I absolutely believe you can. For me, I would go towards more Eastern philosophy type things. If I wanted hands to relax, then I go more into meditative breathing practices and things like that. Really working on relaxing mind, relaxing body sort of stuff like that. It's not to say that one is more effective than the other. We'll both probably arrive at the same result, but the difference is that our approaches, just like our hitters, are probably very different. I couldn't teach you to be me, and you couldn't teach me to be you. And that's something that we really need to also pay attention to, is say, not so much attack the approach because it's different, because those same guys will tell you that everybody's swing is different, right? The same guys that are telling you that well, that's a stupid drill, they'll say, well, every hitter's different and they respond differently. You say, yeah, and every instructor's different. Did that occur to you? And what works for us and how we convey our ideas may be different than the way you convey your ideas. Doesn't mean that we won't all arrive at the same place.
It's one of those things that I think the drive of the analytics and how many clicks you get, I think that kind of weighs out a little bit more than having that conversation, asking that question.
Sure.
If they were to say, hey, you know what, I actually understand why. then that would be the end of the comment. There would be no more
Right,
mentions or
exactly.
notifications going on. You have to keep driving it. But
Yeah, that's fantastic to end the conversation.
I would really like to kind of talk a little bit more, and this might tie into the X factor that you're talking about. A big thing for me is I really like asking and understanding how you were going about and developing and working with players, the atmosphere that you guys were creating. A big thing that I ask is, how is failure involved in your training when you are working with guys? And just a couple of those, the atmosphere and stuff like that, just to learn a little bit more about it. And if X Factor was involved in that, I would love to talk the actual device. If that was involved, I would love for you to also then run into that as
It,
well.
it's involved in that the reason why I named the system the X Factor is being able to hit at the big league level, being able to time down pitches under the most extreme of conditions, 35,000 fans, a paycheck, a guy who wants to take your position and your paycheck away from you, playing against the best of the best, the fastest of the fast, all of these conditions that create this amazing stress. There is absolutely no way to test that except for putting somebody in that position. And we see this in the NFL draft, where you'll see a Division One player who is exceptional, Ryan Leaf, and then when they get to the NFL, they can't perform, even though he had the size, even though he had the prototypical body, even though he had success at the level just below. The highest level just below NFL, he was incredibly successful. Therefore, he should succeed at the NFL, and he doesn't. Well, we draft over 1,000 players a year, maybe a little less now that we've shrunken the draft, but let's just say we draft 1,000 players a year. Each and every one of those players, every guy that I ever was supposed to of this is what your job description is you are not here to fill a minor league roster. You are here to look for guys who have MLB have the capability of being a big league player. They have the tools to be a big league player. Now, the X factor is whether or not those tools will play under these conditions that we can't test you in until you get there. So it's just sort of that educated guess, and that's why, a very small percentage of those guys actually do make it to the big leagues. And so that's why I called it the X factor, and it has everything to do with timing. The interesting thing is, as you know, as a coach, when you're hitting with a guy and he has timing issues, even if you're doing like kind of front toss work where it's fairly easy, and they might, for me, I would say if you can't hit 4 out of 5 pitches exactly the way you should hit them, or they should fly exactly the way is most optimal. When I'm not trying to get you out, if you can't do 4 out of 5, I'm okay with a mistake. But if you can't do 4 out of 5, you're going to struggle mightily against the guy who's trying to get you out. And so you need to be able to control the things that are easiest for you. And so once you prove that, then you can kind of step on and say, okay, now I'm going to try to get you out, and now let's work on those percentages. So that I'm not really sure where I was going on that one. What was the overall question?
No worries. What was, when you were training and working with guys, what's the atmosphere that you were trying to build and instill? What is the role of failure in your training? And if at the time X Factor was created at the time that you were working with guys, how did you use that and involve that in your training?
Got it. Failure is usually something that, or the fear of failure is what usually results in another failure, right? And so the atmosphere that you create for your players is that this is a laboratory. This is a place where you experiment. This is a place where you test the boundaries of what you can do and then what goes beyond what you can do. And you say, okay, well, this is too much. But the only way to find out what is too much is to arrive at too much, because then you can work backwards. But working slowly, incrementally towards that isn't great. So I remember what I was going to say. When you're working with a player and you find that they're not, hitting very well, you'll find that their mechanics get very, very tight and stiff and kind of contrived. They're trying to hit the ball. And then they kind of get the timing groove. And as soon as they get a timing groove, all of a sudden you see their swing free up. And they start hitting harder and harder because what we do once we're not confounded any longer is that we try to work at our most optimal, right? And so that's very much the atmosphere that I create for players, is that if you fall down because you swung too hard, I'll be there to pick you up. Don't be afraid to fall down, right? And so then they start to discover this kind of level of capability, and they say, wow, I hit the ball 500 times harder than I used to simply because I was trying to hit it harder. And I said, well, there you go. But you were refraining that. You were saying, well, I've got to stay controlled. And I said, well, how do you know what the maximum of that is? Don't be controlled. Be totally relaxed and loose. Be reactive. And you'll find out that, there are things that I can't explain to you, and no doctor could explain it to me, and I've done plenty of research on this matter, is I can't tell you how a basketball player can practice a 16-foot jump shot. You could put an X on the ground and say, here's 16 feet from the hoop, and they could practice it and they can get great at it. And then in a game, they won't land on that X, they'll land around that X. But their brain is able to say, a couple extra foot-pounds on this push will put the ball into that hoop. Right, so you would be able to make baskets within a radius of that practiced area, right? I can't explain hand-eye that way. I can't explain how all I do is see an object, reach for it, grab it, right? There's nothing contrived. I didn't think about doing that. I didn't think about the mechanic of doing that. And so as far as my ability to actually hit the ball, as long as I'm not prohibiting my body from being able to hit the ball, tightening and doing things that my brain wouldn't organize for me, as long as I have really outstanding timing skills, I will hit the ball. Now, if I want to have more power, then I might want to distribute weight differently or use that movement of weight differently. But the fact is that I'll be able to hit the ball. Excuse my analogy, but if I could time a guy down, you could stick the bat in your butt and hit the ball, right? Just so long as you could get it around fast enough, if your timing was good. Running to first, I can't help you with that, but you would hit the ball. Would you hit it efficiently? No. But okay, well, that's a good starting point to say, okay, I am hitting the ball. My timing is not confounded anymore, and so therefore. So that was the basis of the X Factor. And when that happened was in the year, I believe it was 2000. It was 2000 or 2001. I'm a bit hazy on it. I was building one of the batting cages that I owned, and I was doing all the work. I was using a roto hammer and digging holes until my hands bled in the ground to put posts in, hanging nets. And what I had done was I was putting up tarps in between my cages so that if I was in a cage with a guy here, he wasn't distracted by a guy who's in this cage over here. Kids, don't have the greatest attention spans and they get distracted. And so for the younger guys, I would put up these tarps so you had like a private tunnel. I was working 17-hour days doing lessons and building a cage all at the same time. So the one cage that I'd finished, I'd be running lessons, and then that lesson would go home, and then I would start building again and start hanging nets and things like that. I had a pitching machine set up, and I had a feeder, and it was set, I had it maxed out. It was probably at 90 or whatever it could possibly throw. It was an old jugs machine, so I think it was about 90 it was topping out at. And I just wanted to distract myself and do something fun instead of work. And so I'd take some swings. And this one night, I swear to you, I could not find my timing for the life of me. And I stepped out and I was taking a breath and kind of frustrated with myself and said, what is going on? I'm watching balls go by. And then it was pure, I don't know, luck, or I don't know what you call it, just synchro destiny. One of my tarps was lying on the ground that I hadn't hung yet, and it was lying in a spot that was perfect for my timing. When the ball crossed it, I went, oh my God, I wasn't swinging when the ball got to that edge of the tarp. So then I stepped back in, and I used my peripheral, and I'm picking up the ball and the tarp at the same time, and I just start raking again. I from swing, and miss, went rake. And I said, oh my God, it's all about realizing your measurements. And so that's what originally brought on the X Factor. I said, if you know when to swing and if you had a reference point to adjust off of, then you can find your timing or perfect your timing. But most of us, and it was always frustrating to me, and I didn't have a solution at the time, early in my career, where I would be sitting next to a coach or a dad or whomever, and they would be telling their kid, swing sooner, swing later. And I'm thinking, swing sooner or swing later than when? They don't know when they swung. How do they know what's earlier, right? And so now I've got this epiphany that says, oh, but there's a measurement to this. At X distance, if I swing, I'll hit the ball. So if I was hitting middle pitches and I was hitting middle pitches off my back foot now, I realize I'm 2 feet late. So if I was swinging at 15 feet, it meant that I had to swing at 17 feet. And we all have a pretty fair reference of distance, right? If I walked up with a baseball to any hitter, including you, if I walked up to you and I said, tell me to stop when I'm 2 feet away, I could walk up and I could measure it, and you would be incredibly close to 2 feet. Or if I said 3 feet, or if I said 5 feet, because we use these types of references. It's how you train a sniper, where you say, think in terms of football fields, because it's a familiar reference. And so when you're looking at an object, you say, well, that's 2 football fields away, which would be the equivalent of 600 feet, right? And so we use these familiar references in order to judge distance. So that's how I came up with the idea for X Factor. And I also came up with a way now to train hitters from a short distance, from doing front toss. I would intuitively throw at a speed that I knew where the ball would be in relation to their swing when they needed to swing at it. Okay, so what I did was I would say, when the ball is over the middle, and we have multiple contact points based on our arc of our swing. And so I'd say, when the ball's over the middle, begin your swing when it feels like it's 2 feet away from your front foot, which is the closest part of your body. We have what's called a universal gravitation to objects. Anything within our field, we can actually feel them. We have this kind of, when somebody gets close to you and you get uncomfortable because you don't like them, well, they're not actually in your space, but they're so close to your space because we can actually feel these things. And so that's one of the things that we use for depth perception. So I would say, okay, over the middle, swing when the ball is 2 feet away. Inside, the contact point for inside is 1 foot in front of you. So I would say, swing when the ball is inside at 3 feet. And then it would make contact, and you would pull it. You'd hit the 2 feet, go up the middle. And then I'd say, when the ball feels as though it's touching your foot on an outside pitch, begin swinging, and you'll hit the ball to right field. And so I'd have parents that would come in and say, my kid can't do anything but hit the ball to right field, or all he does is pull the ball. And I said, that's easy. I'll take care of that in 2 seconds at the end of this lesson. But right now we're just going to talk about his mechanics. And so I was able to get a guy to hit the ball to all fields that could never hit a ball to all fields, simply by giving them cues of measurements based on, I would be throwing at a speed that would work for this. All they had to do was take their swing, and I intuitively figured out how hard I'd have to throw the ball and what that measurement point was, and I always kept it simple so that everybody got the same cue, which was 3, 2, 0. And then I was thinking, and this was 2000, and I was thinking to myself, God, if there was a way where I could capture swings, because we already have radars, so I already know how I can capture pitches, but if I could capture a swing so I knew the exact time it took, which would include their reaction time or any little extra hitch that their hands made backwards after decision, if I could capture that, then I could perfect anybody's timing. And fast forward to, I was training hitters that method that I told you, the 3-2-0, for a very, very long time, and got everybody to understand contact points that way. Impossible to extrapolate. I can't go out and now throw from 60 feet away and throw hard and have them use 3-2-0, because while the contact point remains the same, the attack distance is different, and I can't intuitively work that one out. So I would be able to tell the hitter when I threw the pitch, and if he was 2 feet late, I'd say, you need to swing 2 feet earlier than the last one, but I don't know where you started your swing. That's for you to figure out. So it was helpful to a certain degree. Once we fast forward to, say, 2000, and I think it was about 16, where I discovered the ZEP device. And I said, oh my God, we can capture swings now. Now I've got it. So, because I had written an algorithm for all of this back in 2000. I wrote it down that night that I had the epiphany. I wrote the entire algorithm out. And then I found there was a problem with all of the knob devices, which was they are sensitive to a particular movement or a threshold of movement. And so obviously you don't want to capture somebody who is in the back wagging or at their load. You want to capture their swing. Well, the problem is some guys leak, have a slow movement here, or some guys have an extra hitch. They think they've loaded and then they rehitch. Well, that accounts for an incredible amount of time. I mean, in terms of swings, when you talk about an average swing is 150 milliseconds, the mechanical aspect of it, you've added this delay, which is reaction time, which an average reaction time is between 200 and 250 milliseconds. Pro guys are probably closer to about 180 milliseconds with anticipation and they're elite athletes, and so they have a better reaction ability than most of us. So you're looking at 180 milliseconds added on to your 150 millisecond swing already. Then you add a hitch, and that hitch sometimes takes 100 milliseconds. So now, or more. And so now you've gone from having a 350 millisecond overall swing to now having a 450 overall swing, and the pitch only took 411 milliseconds to get there. You have no shot. So the devices that were out there weren't capable of capturing the metrics that I needed in order to coordinate swings. And so I created a knob device that would capture those things. It was based, all of the knob devices that are out there are all golf technology that has now moved into baseball. And the problem with golf technology is that technology has no concern for actual time. Right? They don't care how long it takes you to swing a golf club because it doesn't have to work within a time window, right? There's the golf ball sitting on a tee. I can attack it anytime I want to. I can take as long as I want to delay here. But baseball was very different. And the way I always perceived baseball was it's a sprint sport. We don't, it's an interception sport, and therefore we have a 3-foot sprint, right? From start to finish line, it's about a 3-foot swing. And we don't get to swing when we want to. We swing when we have to. And the ball tells us when we have to. And so that in and of itself is a cue, all right? The ball in a particular place in space is a cue that says go. If I'm right, then I hit it. And if I'm wrong, I don't hit it. And then I make an adjustment off of those. And so I did a lot of studying on brains, tons on eyes and brains, and how we function and how we absorb memory, where we store particular types of memories, how we encode memory and things like that. Well, once I created the knob device that could capture your reaction time and your swing time, I could now couple that with my second system, which would capture the pitch, run an algorithm that said, it's what we learned, in grade school when we did word problems. There's a car traveling east at 65 miles an hour. There's a car traveling west at 45 miles an hour. At what point will they meet? That's what hitting is. It's a mathematical equation. We determine what the contact point is, which say that pitch appears to be over the middle of the plate. The middle of the plate pitch is met with my swing at right in front of my foot, right at my little toe. And so now I make the measurement from a release to that, and it takes this ball traveling 90 miles an hour, whatever time it takes to get to this point here. This hitter here, his swing is overall 150 millisecond swing with a 200 millisecond delay, 350 millisecond total swing time. He has to decide to swing when the ball is 43 feet away. So I send a message to that hitter, that alert that says, swing now. Their brain processes that message. It has the reaction time to that message, which is equivalent to the reaction time of seeing the ball and saying go. And they swing and the ball meets their bat. So I went out and proved this. I built the system, a Frankenstein version of, all kinds of bizarre looking things to get the job done, because I didn't, it takes an incredible amount of money to build these things. So filed for several patents, received my patents, and I have 4 more in the works right now. I tested this system out on college players. I proved this system out. If you know a hitter that can, because I think you've seen my videos, if you know a hitter that can step into a cage with the machine throwing at 90 to 92 miles an hour, 92 and a half actually, Because the speed of the ball vacillates because of the electrical cord sends pulses of energy differently to the machine, and then the balls have a little bit different weight sometimes, and so you won't get a consistent 90 mile an hour pitch. You'll get a 90 or an 89 or a 91 and things like that. And so I was capturing these pitches at 90 to 92 and a half miles an hour. I had a hitter in there, or several hitters that did this. One that I put up on my video, that he received 8 pitches in a row. He hit a perfect same shot on a middle end pitch 8 times in a row. If you know a guy, big league guy or other, that can step into a cage without any assistance and go and hit the exact same thing 8 times in a row, I want to see it. Because I've never met a guy that can do that. Now, what my system did was proved exactly that. I had the hitter hitting the ball. It was exactly the same. One of the interesting things that you learn not only by working on timing is that you can actually prove out your hitting philosophies, because you'll say, okay, this guy didn't have a loopy swing, he didn't drop, but yet he was getting optimal launch angle every time by swinging down and making contact while his bat was on its up portion of its arc. And so he got optimal launch angle without having to disrupt or create a higher margin of error swing path, right? So not only is this effective in helping a hitter learn their timing, but it also helps with being able to look at your mechanics and say, how effective are they? When timing is perfect, what happens with the ball? What is the reaction of the ball? So I dragged in a 12-year-old kid who was in a cage next to me, and I said, hey, you want to try this? You ever hit a 90 mile an hour pitch before? And he said, no. And I asked his coach, I said, what's the fastest you guys have seen? And he said, 65. And I said, okay, how would you like to hit a 90? And he said, sure. And I captured a swing and got the time, put him in the machine, bang, 90, 90, 90. How do you hit 90 or 100 as a player? You have to have seen it, because we have no reference, as we talked about earlier. And so if I have no reference point, then I'm just swinging at my familiar time. Like if I've only seen 90 miles an hour and I see 100, you're not going to hit it. It's going to take you several swings to hit it. And what I'm doing is eliminating the failure aspect, which our brain does not encode. We don't hold on to failure memory because they're useless. We don't have the bandwidth for all of this. So we throw out the failures, and then what we do is we remember the successes, and we reference those successes. And so now when I see a situation where the ball looks similar and it's increasing in size, it's dilating or moving towards me at a familiar rate, then I resource a memory very quickly that says, I remember when I swung at that pitch, and so that's when I'm going to swing now. And so that's how we develop as hitters and our timing. The problem I have with getting people to understand this is twofold. One is most coaches, yourself probably included, didn't believe you could actually train timing. We can train mechanics all day. We have control over that. But timing, that's really innate. That's left to the hitter. And while I believe it very much is innate, the guys who are great at it, it can be trained and it can be accelerated for those who don't have that innate gift of being able to coordinate their movements with a moving object. So that's the first problem, is the paradigm that suggests that, well, that's just the talent that does that. The second part that has been difficult is people go, well, yeah, but you don't hear a sound in a game, so therefore. Well, the hitter is interacting with this, and this is a very common teaching method in psychology, which is to introduce a signal. It's called behavioral learning. You introduce a signal and develop a habit, then remove the signal, and that habit remains. And so that's what I do with my system. Is I don't say, the only way you're going to be able to hit a 95 mile an hour pitch is to have this tone sent to you all the time. I test with and without. And what happens is that we more quickly accelerate, because the hitter is interacting. It's not like the tone's there and the hitter's not doing anything. He's also processing this whole thing. So they are correlating the distance that they're attacking with that tone, and then you remove that alert, that signal, whatever it is, and then that behavior pattern remains. And so you can accelerate their progress. And people don't understand that, and it's because they don't do a lot of study on these things. They just completely write things off because they look at the anomalous behavior that I've never heard a tone tell me when to swing before, therefore it won't work. Say, well, that's not true. So unfortunately, I've been able to test my systems, and again, I build them, take them apart, build another one, build it, just so they're a bit sturdier and things like that. Once I got through my testing, I really believed I was going to get some investment because I know this market very well, having been in it for so long, and so I know what the economy of this market is and what people will pay. I know what people paid me. Right? For the very same problem that I'm trying to solve with my system, I know what people paid me. The desperation of a parent that says, my kid can't hit. And it breaks my heart that my kid can't hit, so I'm happy to pay you to help my kid hit. And I'm saying, I've got something that transcends mechanics, because once you have great mechanics, it doesn't matter. If you can't time a pitch down, you'll just look good striking out. Right? And so I never ended up getting financing on it. I got rejected from Major League Baseball teams. I had one that wanted an exclusive on it, and the dollar figure was pretty good. But I'm not really that motivated by money to where I would say, yeah, I'd happily give this to one team so that nobody else could have it, because the reason I built this was for the parent and the kid, or any other minor league player or anybody else. I didn't want it exclusive to a team. I want to help people, because that's what my career has been about. So that's sort of the long but short version of the X Factor.
I love it. And what are there any facilities outside of the guys that you're training at the moment? Are there any other, you said that you've done a lot of test rebuilds, any spots that have the X Factor outside of you?
No, right now I'm in a rewriting of some things. Remember, I told you they're Frankensteins? They're, like the knob device looked like the magazine of a semi-automatic weapon. It wasn't, because it costs a lot of money to get things miniaturized. So once I didn't get financing, I kind of had to work out a way to get it to do it in-house, to actually fund the whole thing ourselves, which is pretty expensive and pretty time-consuming. Patents alone were, like $100,000 a piece. I mean, it's an unbelievably expensive process. If anybody has an idea out there that they want to get patented, you better really think you can make money off of it, because it's going to cost you a fortune to get your patent approved, just through attorney fees and things like that. But no, it will probably. I've gotten to the point where I've decided I'm not going to try to convince people too much anymore. I'm just going to do it myself. So I'm currently restructuring some of the, so I have something that I don't have to rebuild every week. I'm building a system now. I've tightened up a lot of my coding and things like that. And I have an engineer working on some of the communication issues between the knob device and the software. And I'm just going to do it myself. I have a couple players. I have a guy that is at rookie ball right now that I'm going to be working with. I had another guy who is a college player, a D1 guy that I'm going to be working with this. And then I don't know if you're familiar with her, Lily Martineau. She is a fantastic girl, the hardest worker, the incredible aptitude. I'm going to test, or not test, but actually perform training on those three with this system. Eventually, I will have a retail version of this, once people understand, because I'm going to have metrics. I'm going to have data to prove how quickly memory starts to be produced. And you will be seeing this result without the X Factor. The X Factor is going to be there to train them, but then you're going to see the increase in their timing ability and their performance subsequent to the use of this. And so I'll have all this data in my database. And I'll be able to prove that out. So the idea is going to be, I'm going to have two separate systems, one of which would be a retail model, which would work for anybody who is high school and below, which would work it's going to be governed at 90 miles an hour. 90 and down, you can go into a batting cage and out of the box, now have perfect timing. I capture my swing, I can hit off the machine, and I have perfect timing. The second version that I have would be mine solely. And that would be for working with professional players and college players and things like that, which would work up to any speed. The human capacity limits us to 106 miles an hour. Anything beyond 106 miles an hour, we aren't physically capable of swinging in time to hit something that fast, which will explain to you why a guy, when he's at his best, Chapman, can't be hit. You know, if you're throwing above 106 miles an hour, then there's not enough time in the event for your swing and that ball to meet. It just won't happen. Fortunately, there aren't a lot of guys that throw 107 miles an hour. So you can work it, my system will be working with hitters that can, face, 100 plus regularly. And I would be able to coordinate that and develop their memory for those types of pitches. And so that will be exclusive to me. I won't give that to a Major League Baseball team. I won't even offer it to one. They can buy the retail version, which is up to 90, and they won't want it. But I have had such a bad experience with professional baseball that I don't want to help them in the slightest bit. And I'm happy to say that right here. You can mark my words on that. I don't want to help them at all. They'll never have it, and I don't care how much they offer me.
Well, if you ever get into the spot where you want to possibly have a little small facility here in Denver, Colorado, test it out, timing is one of the biggest things that I've been working with, and is one of the biggest things that amateur hitters don't put any particular training or any thought into. I just started working in being the high school hitting coach at local alma mater high school here, and just sitting and asking and talking with guys like, were you late or early right there? And I actually had a freshman pull a ball that almost hit himself in the ankle. I asked him, were you late or early right there? And he said he was late. I said, I go, what do you mean? Explain to me. And then he started saying it out loud and walking through the process of his swing. He's just going, wait, I was early. It's like, yeah.
Now, it is possible that he was late to hit it in your foot on a pull side. If he hit it off his handle, and instead of taking a swing, he turned. Because as soon as you turn, like Teacher Man will tell you, your barrel enters into the zone. And so you prematurely enter into the zone, so you could get the ball way back here and turn and be late because it hit off of your handle and shoot it into your foot. So it is possible. Probably not in the situation you're talking about, but I just wanted to add that caveat that it is possible to be late and pull the ball at the same time. And you'd have to do something mechanically to affect that.
Yes, and just the biggest thing that I've been working with guys is just asking, when do you start your stride? When do you start your load? How long is your load? If you can get to your load where you feel you can swing quickly and it doesn't take too much time, then we don't need as much time of us kind of moving around and getting that stride. And just asking them little simple questions like that. When do you start your stride? When were you late? Were you early? They're just struggling to answer those questions, and it's just something that I don't think many people are asking or bringing to light. And for you to have something, like I said, if you ever want to try and test something out here in Denver, Colorado, man, I would absolutely love to.
We'll have a discussion on that. First, I will say that's a great point that you just made. There are three aspects to timing. You ask people about timing and they'll tell you, oh, when you swing at the pitch. And I go, no. Okay, there are three aspects of timing. One is, at what pitch cue do I initiate getting into a launch position? That's timing one. Timing two is my subconscious awareness of how long my swing takes to get from point A to point B. I gained that through lots and lots and lots of repetition of swings. And so I don't know in measures of time. I can't tell you how long it was, but somehow I intuitively know how long it takes me to get from here to here because I've taken so many of them. So that's timing two. Timing three is, when do I swing based on all those things. In order for me to perform steps 2 and 3, I first have to get into position to hit, because it doesn't matter. I see this all the time in big leagues, particularly because people are so obsessed with delaying their strides now and trying to sync it with their swings, that if you got down late, it doesn't matter. You're done. You didn't get into position to hit soon enough, so everything else doesn't matter any longer. And so getting into the position early enough to where now I can process the ball, now I can swing and my swing can catch up to that pitch. I have to first get into stage 1 of timing, which is, when do I prep? So that's a great point. The other thing, just to digress off of that to something you just also said is the engineer that I've hired to work on a lot of the X Factor stuff for me is in Denver, Colorado. So I will be in Denver very soon, and you and I will connect when I get to Denver, because I have to go out there and start seeing, physically what his progress is. I get all kinds of reports. He sends me videos every day of what he's working on and how that is progressing, and I troubleshoot with him and help him, overcome some of the roadblocks that he might come up against. But I need to see the physical product pretty soon, and so I will be in Denver, and you and I will talk when I get there.
Oh, I'm super excited now. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
For me, anything else that you are in your training, in your X Factor, is there anything else that you kind of are seeing or feeling that is kind of missing in amateur and professional baseball, in the sense of just the idea of the perspective of how important timing is? Is there anything that you're kind of seeing, whether it be some coaches that, like the ex-pro guys, their perspective is just what they've seen, what they've done, they kind of struggle? Is there anything in the game right now that you would like to kind of see adjust for the better of players' development?
Sure. I'd love to see us go back to shorter strides, high leg kicks, and guys who are successful with it. I also see them failing with it, but because they are so incredibly elite that they get away with things that make your job much more difficult. So when we talk about getting into position at the right time, what you brought up about when you stride and get into a launch position. We have this misconception that large moves produces more power. They don't. We have this misconception that we have to have perpetual motion in order to have energy to then convert into swing energy, right? There's something that they discount called potential energy, stored energy. If you watch a track athlete who has to be the fastest sprinter in the world to come out of the blocks, he gets into everything about sprinting, be it speed skating, be it swimming, be it the 90-meter dash. Everything about it is exactly the same as hitting. There is a on your mark cue, which is my hitter standing in the box waiting while the pitcher is picking up signs, getting loose and relaxed. Get set is the pitcher going through his windup, and that's your cue to get into your launch. There's my get set. Well, that's the sprinter now dropping into their launch position, be it a speed skater, be it a runner. And then there's go. For them, it's the alarm. It's the gun, it's the bell, it's the whistle. For us, it's the ball in space. So there's your similarity between sprint sports and hitting. When you look at sprinters, when you look at Usain Bolt, you don't see a guy bouncing around in the blocks. First of all, that motion of bouncing would be disruptive because he doesn't control the timing of the event. So there's no knowing where he would be within that bounce when the gun sounded. So that's one. Two is, it doesn't matter because all we're trying to do is get into a gather position. Basically, we create some muscle tension that we can work forward off of, so we don't have to go back to forward. So you don't see the track runner then drop when the gun sounds and then go forward. You see the sprinter jump forward as soon as he hears that sound. So we don't need movement in order to convert into another movement. We actually can be pretty steady. The problem with being pretty steady is you have to calm your mind. And it's the same thing that happens with sprint athletes that is starting to transfer into other sports like football and baseball where meditation comes in. But if you are hyper in your mind, you're going to false start, right? So what you need to do is be in a physical position to where you can unravel whenever you want to, but at the same time be mentally completely relaxed so that you can react without anticipation. So that's a big key to timing and things like that I don't see happening today, that I see the antithesis of that guys that have long moves are being successful, therefore that must be the key. Well, we spent a few decades talking guys out of high leg kicks for the reasons that I just brought up. But suddenly a new generation came along and they had high leg kicks. And so everybody said, see, that's what we were missing. We needed the high leg kick. Same thing happened when Joe Mauer won a batting title, and Joe Mauer was regarded as the best hitter in baseball. I was in the tunnels with Joe, waiting for one of my players to come out to work with him, pre-game in Minnesota, and Joe had just gotten off the DL, and he sets up super quiet load. And I was thinking, wow, really impressive, very quiet, short stride maneuver, quiet load, nothing's jumpy, and then he goes wham, wrapped his bat, and then wham, smoked the ball. And I said, wow, he wraps his bat, how interesting. And I said, well, I wouldn't teach that, but I wouldn't fix it. He's an amazing hitter with his little swing flaw that we talked about way earlier. So then this symposium of the top baseball hitting minds, big league guys, get together, and they all look at this and say, that's the key. Nobody's wrapping. Joe Mauer's wrapping. We got to wrap. It creates whip. And I challenge anybody to explain to me the physics behind how is it that redirecting an object of weight pointing this direction where its mass wants to drop down here, how does it create whip if you're pulling it back around to go over here? You're creating drag, not whip. And so simply because Joe Mauer did it and did it well and had whippy hands, I don't care what you did, doesn't mean that that little thing that he did was the key to it. And unfortunately, Major League Baseball is constantly in search of the anomalous behavior that must be the gold at the end of the rainbow.
It's that confirmation bias that it's really easy when you're looking for something and
Exactly.
you see it and it's like, oh, well, that's the only reason. To talk a little bit about, Ken, I'm so happy that you came on, man. I'm so glad because just this small conversation, one of my biggest things that I talk about when I'm working with my guys is you have a rubber band, and we want to pull that back and we can get a nice snap. Then you have the little braces rubber bands, if you know what I'm talking about, the little tiny guys.
Sure.
Now, for the little tiny guy, I don't have the ability to pull as far back. But when I do pull just a little bit, I get to the same percentage of what I'm looking for. I pull that thing back just a little bit. I'm at full tension. I'm at full. If I was to let that go, that thing is zinging. And it didn't take a big move because it's an efficient move. But when I have this bigger rubber band, I have to use more space, use more time, use a bigger move, more energy to get that same type of tension that I just had. But it requires more space. It requires more time. Now, if we could take Happy Gilmore or whatever and put him in a box without any variables, without any pitch selection, without anything like that, if it was just a T, that would be incredible because now we have full moment, but you can't do that. You don't have that time. You don't have that space to allow
We're increasing the linear velocity of our swings by having that type of motion. It would actually, here's the interesting part, unless you came to a very good abrupt stop, then you would reduce your angular momentum because you would be moving forward with an object that was moving forward and turning. And so that would be the equivalent of taking a string with a weight on the end of it. And if I moved around with it, it flops. But if I stay steady behind it, and so that's how we create centripetal movement, is to resist opposite equal to an object turning. So yeah, one thing though, your rubber band analogy is great because it's a terrific visual of saying creating a stretch. But one thing, and this is a thing that Teacher Man talks a lot about that is absolutely false, is that, you know, he talks about coiling around your hip and making this turn so that you create this torsion spring. If you turn your head all the way to the right for me right now, all the way, go. Now, does it snap back once you relax?
No.
It does not. No, it doesn't. We don't work in springs. So that rubber band, while if I release the rubber band, it's going to snap forward, we don't work that way. We are actually removing slack and creating a slight amount of muscle tension so that we can move forward when we use the assistance of other muscles. So we actually have to use a muscle assistance in order to go forward. We don't actually coil and spring. It just doesn't work. There's nothing in our body that works that way. And so it actually takes the rubber band idea is beautiful in talking about length of creating stretch, because that's exactly what we're doing is we're lengthening our tendons and muscles by taking these launch moves. But they themselves don't snap. Now it's going to take me sending a message to my body to assist that, to redirect that without any of the extra back. So the good part of this analogy is if you pulled the rubber band slightly back, then when you wanted to shoot it, you pulled it back again. That's inefficient. You want to come to that full position where you've created the maximum stretch.
And that's the beauty, I think, of the openness and that perspective of just being willing. I mean, we're conversating. I was looking in my lens of kind of going this way, and just by me kind of saying that, you took it and we were able to connect and make a full circle of analogies, and just being able to kind of look at different things and say, like, you know, wording, the verbiage of what we use. I've told all my guys, I don't care if I say a word and it doesn't click, if that word doesn't make sense to you, tell me, and I'll use a different word. The English language has so many damn words for that have the same meaning. I'll find another word in the dictionary to use, as long as it makes sense to you and we can work around it. The verbiage doesn't matter. It's the importance of the meaning and what we are teaching. That's the most important part about it.
And what I did was I nerded it out, right? Just to kind of just common speak it. I nerded out what you were talking about. What you were talking about actually would arrive at the same conclusion as how I explained it, right? Your stretch of the rubber band, your hitter would understand that stretch. Now they whether they know it or not, they're reacting and redirecting. If they thought that they were uncoiling and springing, terrific, right? It didn't matter. So what you were saying was just as correct as what I was saying. I just nerded it out a little more and said, okay, well, here's the full explanation of that. This is how the rubber band actually worked. But it didn't matter because we would have both gotten to the same result.
And that's what I think the job of a hitting instructor is. I mean, I have a TV right here that has Rapsodo. When my guys hit, it displays Rapsodo. I got another one that displays Blast Motion. Hopefully we can get an X Factor TV up here as soon as possible. But I mean, like, I have all this stuff. I have everything. I'm certified in multiple different things. I have the knowledge in my head. It's not my job to, as you say, nerd out to every single person. That's not why, you know, Timmy, that's a 14-year-old, and his mom is bringing their kid to a lesson with me so I can explain what launch angle, you know, time to con, whatever. My job is to make it digestible, consumable for them, right, so that way we can end at, like you said, the same, you know, destination point. It doesn't matter how you get there, as long as we can get there. That's the whole goal.
Yeah. That's like saying, well, one analogy is better than another analogy. Well, they're just analogies. They're not actualities. And so we're just using things to convey an idea that might create a visual image or might be more digestible to the person in front of us. So yeah, and I know you found that some guys respond very well to dialogue. Others have to feel. Others have to see. And so we have very different learners in front of us all the time, and so there's always a very different technique that's at play. And I know a bad instructor when I see one, sadly, is because every lesson that they're doing next to me is a carbon copy of the one they did before, and I'm thinking, how could you possibly use the same approach on everybody and expect everyone to respond to it? Everybody is very, very different. And which goes into some stuff that maybe we can talk a different time, so we don't like spend 40 hours here. But brain wirings are very unique. There are 16 different types of brain wirings, and some brain wirings are more conditioned to or require visual learning, tactile learning. They respond more to oral explanations. Some brain types are gross motor oriented, using big muscles very, very well, but using fine muscles very poorly. Some are very fine muscle oriented, and some are a balance of the two. To suggest that we should replicate Ted Williams' swings and do what Ted Williams does is virtually impossible for someone who doesn't share his brain type, because that would be the equivalent of saying, if I taught you how to paint, you would be Rembrandt. If I taught you how to play piano, you would be Mozart. I don't care how much work you put into it, you aren't going to be Mozart and you aren't going to be Rembrandt. You might be an artist, but you won't be that artist. You might not even be as close to as good because you don't possess the same fine motor skills as an artist, a true artist. And so you can't replicate swings and say, well, do what this guy does because, the hitter in front of me may be wired very, very differently. I brain type most of my hitters, the guys that I work with. But most people don't think about those kind of things. And this is, again, what helps to be kind of nerdy on my end is that I do so much research, it's frightening. And I'm really good at kind of tying things together that may be seemingly not connected, but they actually are, so I can look at analogies of different practices and say, but we're doing the similar thing, even though it's a totally different sport or it's a totally different, whatever.
I love it. I feel as if we're very similar. I'm looking at my kind of tools I've got right here that I use to help my guys kind of feel stuff out. Dude, I've got like a cricket bat in here. I got a golf training tool in here. I've got T-ball bats. I've got a bat with like a nunchuck that has a rope in the middle in between. You just got to try out different stuff. What works for one person may not work for another. I like to just throw shit on the wall, see what sticks for each individual, and we go from there. But to finish up here, like you said, don't want to go 40 hours, but I would absolutely 1,000% love to have you on as many times as possible.
And you can edit, so I'm not imposing a time limit. I'm good. So worries. You can edit if you want to. So if you wanted to go.
I was gonna say I absolutely love. These conversations, they're incredible. My goal for what we're doing here is a little bit interview type, I guess. I want people to kind of see different perspectives of different facilities. One thing that we're seeing a lot is with the failure aspect, you have to be able to understand and embrace failure. And I've talked to.
I don't know if I'd embrace failure as much as I just accept it and become indifferent to it. Right? That's the thing. The key isn't actually embracing it and saying I enjoy failure. The key is to be completely indifferent. Indifferent means unaffected. I swing and miss. I don't. Okay, I'll give you an example. A shark is really fantastic at indifference because what a shark does is it goes after its target, and if it takes a bite and misses, it doesn't contemplate the miss. It just says, my objective is to eat that fish. So he swims back around and comes back and takes another bite at it. And whether or not he gets it or not has everything to do with whether he comes back after it. But at no point does the shark contemplate their failure. They just simply say, this is the objective. Let me go back after my objective. Every swing and miss means another opportunity to hit the ball. Then fine, bring another pitch. I'm going to hit it. If I get out, then I say, great, I got another at bat coming to hit the ball. A lot of times what we do is we get out and then we say, oh, great, this is another opportunity for me to get out. And that's where we go wrong with that. So I wouldn't say I would ever recommend embracing failure, but becoming indifferent to it. That the goal is to, it feels so good to succeed that succeeding feels better than the feeling I have of not failing. Because too many hitters go into the box with the objective of, and I know you've seen this, they'll beat themselves up when they make mistakes. They crush the ball and there's no reaction at all because they think, well, yeah, but there's a failure waiting right around the corner. And I would tell any hitter in my cage that was demonstrative when they failed, the first thing I would tell them when they succeeded and didn't do anything, I said, then you better bring confetti because every time you hit the ball well, I want you to react as ridiculously as you did when you failed. Like you're beating yourself up when you failed, but you don't reward yourself when you succeed. That's ridiculous. You're either happy when you succeed and indifferent when you fail, or you're indifferent to both. You just say, that's my job. I hit.
I think maybe embrace was incorrect word choice. I think maybe I should have said understand.
Right. Yeah, and I wasn't going to correct you. I was just giving you sort of a perspective of
100%. Hey, that's what you have to have. You have to have that perspective. But just for the understanding of failure, that because there's a lot of instructors that I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, that go through, and it's almost like happy-go-lucky swings where everything is just almost served on a silver platter. The kids do nothing wrong. Everything is just, a perfect world, where you have to introduce at some point a challenge. You have to introduce at some point where someone goes, oh, wow, like I do need to get better. And for that to happen, you have to understand why you're failing and stuff. And the goal of what these has been to just for people to see how similar that is, but how different people get to it. I had on Robert Reagans, who's a gentleman, Lackawanna County Community College. He has put out papers about people using earplugs and people using eye patches just to change sensories and stuff like that. And he's gotten PRs out of guys and stuff, and he's written papers. But he's how he gets to what I'm trying to get to, how he gets to what you're trying to get to, the end goal of a student being good, being able to compete and understand. We get to the same spot by different ways. And that's been my goal of what this is an interview style. I have another kind of version of this podcast I would really like to do, is where we just kind of talk hitting, just kind of talk a little bit more in depth of that. So I would absolutely love to have you on again whenever you're able to come on again for that. For me, the interview portion of it, I feel pretty good. The one last question I would have, if there are any people on Twitter that you would suggest that you think are good follows, any podcasts, books, movies, videos, anything that you that you think is a good option for people. And then if you have anything that you would like to plug for your business, any partners, any closing remarks, would love to have it.
Okay. As far as plugs and things like that, again, I've kind of shut down the business aspect of this and just focused more on just developing my products, and I'm going to be using them myself. And then eventually I'll get into the step where I'm going, okay, now it's time to re-promote this and try to get, investors and things like that. So that is sort of withstanding. But, a guy I really, really like a lot, he's a really positive guy. He's a terrific motivator. A great mentor is a guy named Walter Beatty. I don't know if you follow him or not. He's a terrific sort of pre-college mentor who tells you what it takes to get to the collegiate level, discusses options on, JUCO through D1 and things like that. A really positive guy, a really good influencer. That's somebody who I would probably recommend. Other than that, there are lots of guys that I think are great, but I think as far as just the being helpful to the youth players out there, I think that's a guy I would endorse for that. What was another question? So I got two of them out of the way. One of them, I'm not plugging myself. The other is I recommend
just
follow Walter Beatty. He's a great guy.
Just any podcast, Twitter accounts, videos, books, anything that you think works well.
I am, 25 years in this sport of working full time. And I don't know, you won't find a lot of guys that do that, because I work full time. This is my job for 25 years. I don't do a lot of I don't watch a lot of baseball on television. I don't watch, you give me tickets to games, I'd have unbelievable tickets, and I give them to other people, because I'm in it so much that I can't do anything but analyze baseball when I watch it anyway, so I don't get the joy that I used to. I don't watch a lot of video because I find it fairly frustrating. A lot of most of what you see out there is a fairly myopic perspective of things. I haven't run across that wow in baseball. I find that wow outside of baseball all the time. And so most of the reading I do is on brain function, on what are memory and things like that. I read tons and tons and tons. I used to read about 8 academic studies a day, just on how we respond to video, whether it is transferable to ecological real world movements, virtual reality, all of these things. That's the kind of stuff that I look at. And so anything that I would read that I would recommend is you guys would just go, no, thank you.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Ken. Thank you so much. And like I said,
My
I'm really
pleasure.
looking forward to having you on again and being able to get a little bit more in depth on the hitting aspect of everything like that as well.
Yeah, and it was great because you don't talk that much on Twitter. You don't put that much out there. So I didn't have any ideas of who you were. You seem like a nice guy, but I didn't know who you were or what to expect personality wise. I think a lot of people, I am pretty active on Twitter, and I think a lot of people have a particular idea of who I am and who I actually am and what I appear as in flat text are two very different people. And I always like to have an opportunity to speak live and people go, wow, I didn't know you were a nice guy.
Well, I'm excited. Look forward when you're out here in Denver. We'll catch up, and
Yeah, for
thousand
sure.
percent, we're gonna have you on as soon as we can again.
Absolutely, it was great fun. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome, sir. We're going to close out of the live stream.